Anthropic just released Claude Opus 4.7, but they did it without the usual fanfare. There were no live demos or pre-recorded launch videos, just a simple pred on X early in the morning. Dropping a major model at 7:30 a.m. is an unusual move for Anthropic, likely timed to get the release into the wild before an anticipated announcement from OpenAI. The marketing claims are significant. Anthropic reports that this version surpasses GPT 5.4 and the previous Opus 4.6 across a variety of industry benchmarks. It shows particularly strong gains in agentic coding, where the model has to navigate complex, multi-file programming tasks autonomously. For developers already using the Claude API, the transition looks seamless, because the pricing for the 4.7 tier is exactly the same as the previous generation. However, the sticker price is only one part of the equation. While the cost per 1,000 tokens hasn't changed, the internal benchmarks suggest an effective operational cost increase of 35 to 50%. This gap between the list price and the actual bill is driven by specific architectural changes. To see if the upgrade is worth the investment, we have to look at how these changes affect a project's logic and its budget. The first major shift is how the model processes your instructions. Opus 4.7 now takes prompts entirely literally. In contrast, earlier versions of Claude would interpret instructions loosely, using a bit of guesswork to fill in the gaps if a prompt was underspecified. Because the model no longer tries to guess user intent, legacy workflows that relied on that flexibility are likely to break. Anthropic recommends harness retuning for all users. This means engineers must go back and manually adjust the prompts and the testing framework surrounding the model. Simply dropping old prompts into 4.7 can result in unexpected outputs or cause agentic systems to halt due to missing expected formatting. The model provides a much higher level of precision, but accessing that precision requires an immediate investment in developer labor to rewrite existing prompt architecture. Moving beyond just the prompts, this updated tokenizer is the primary driver of increased costs under the hood. This component dictates how the model breaks down raw text into the numerical tokens it can actually process. While this update improves the model's overall comprehension of text, there is a clear mathematical trade-off involved. This chart shows the impact. For identical input data, Opus 4.7 generates 35% more tokens. Consequently, your input volume inflates instantly. Silently, without changing any code, your data usage will accelerate rapidly toward your monthly budget limit. Every API call effectively becomes more expensive because the model requires more tokens to read it. Operations teams should expect their existing token budgets to drain at an accelerated pace compared to previous months. This inflation isn't constant. It fluctuates based on the specific type of content you are processing, making monthly costs harder to predict. The benefit is a more capable understanding of text, but the direct result is a higher volume of billable tokens for every prompt sent. For those using Claude Code, Anthropic has set the default effort level to extra high. This setting forces the model to spend more computational cycles on later turns of a task, specifically designed for complex agentic workflows. They've also added Ultra Review, a dedicated session where the model performs its own self-verification to find bugs and design flaws. These tools result in much higher reliability on difficult coding problems when compared to the performance of Opus 4.6. However, deeper thinking requires more output. These self-verification loops generate a cumulative increase in output tokens for the same final answer. If left unmanaged, this high volume of output tokens will cause developers to hit their API rate limits far more quickly than they are used to. The model reasons better than ever, but these new default settings will aggressively consume your token limits unless you actively throttle the effort levels. Opus 4.7 also introduces multimodal upgrades, improving how the model sees and interprets high-resolution images. This supports Anthropic's strategy of using file system-based memory for their coding agents, rather than relying on simpler retrieval methods. Providing the model with high-resolution visual data leads to much more accurate reasoning when the model is analyzing complex documents. The trade-off is that these high-res files and extensive file systems consume a massive number of tokens, further increasing the cost of each session. There is also a caveat regarding the benchmark scores Anthropic released for these multimodal features. Anthropic used an internal implementation of the benchmarks for their testing. This means the scores aren't directly comparable to the public leaderboards used to evaluate other models. While the capabilities are impressive, they are currently the most expensive features to run and the most difficult to verify against the rest of the market. To decide if you should switch, we can look at your project's needs on this quadrant chart, balancing reasoning against budget sensitivity. If you are in the upper left, building complex coding agents that require deep file system memory, you should migrate to 4.7. For these high-stakes tasks, the improved reliability of the self-verification tools justifies the higher token burn. But if you fall into the lower right, running standard text generation with a tight budget, it is better to stay with 4.6 for now. The shift to literal instruction following will likely break your current setup, and the tokenizer bloat will increase your costs without offering a meaningful return on the investment. Managing Opus 4.7 requires moving away from open-ended API calls. If you migrate, you should use the new Task Budgets beta to set hard limits on how many tokens the model can consume in a single session.